Hey, Kwame, how are you? Can you hear me?
I'm good to hear from you. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, myself as well. It sounds like we have a little bit of a lag time in our connection today. So we'll have to be patient with that.
Hmm. Yeah, we'll work through it. We'll work through it.
Yeah,
And if it gets bad, just let me know.
for sure. So, Kwame, I came to find out about you because I like to listen to podcasts as well. And you have a podcast about something that my listeners and myself are always interested in, which is negotiation.
That's right. Yeah. So I have the Negotiate Anything podcast, and right now it's the top ranked negotiation podcast on iTunes, and it's been a lot of fun. I've been doing that for about 2 years now, and it's evolved from originally it was called Negotiation for Entrepreneurs, and then I realized that I had a more diverse audience that I was than I thought, and so I changed it to Negotiate Anything to have more of a broad focus to apply to all people in business, whether or not they're entrepreneurs.
Mm. Well, this market here is entrepreneurs. However, sometimes, and actually quite often, they don't refer to themselves as entrepreneurs. They think they are, or say they are business owners, or sometimes they don't even think that. They just might say they're running the company. So interesting that you refocused and reframed your podcast. But regardless, everybody listening here to you today to get your wise nuggets of wisdom is in a position where they're going to be negotiating things at some point on some pretty large and some pretty, sometimes what we might think pretty small contracts. But even those small contracts are very important to the people they're negotiating with, which is in the smaller cases, homeowners.
Perfect. No, that's exciting. And I think it's always exciting to chat with somebody who has an entrepreneurial focus because that's my bread and butter. I'm a business lawyer. And so I work with small businesses. So I love finding new and exciting ways for people to use the skill of negotiation to move the business forward.
Right. And I suppose negotiation happens around us all the time. You just said you have a young child. How old is?
Yes. So Kai is 2 years old.
And is she naturally negotiating all the time?
All the time and winning because I think he realizes that
Oh,
he has
sorry.
all the leverage.
Yeah.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, he realizes he has all the leverage, and he exercises that and utilizes that leverage
Yeah.
maniacally. But it comes with the territory.
Yeah. So all of us listening to this, or perhaps, so we're doing this as a podcast, which is the audio, but some people are watching it as a video as well. So it's on YouTube or some other video sharing platform. So people can get it in multiple ways. And just so you know, for those of you who are listening or watching, this will also be a transcript because today Kwame is going to be teaching us some points about negotiation that we can use with our vendors, with our clients, and maybe with our 2-year-old kids.
Hopefully, I will say this. I will say this. He gives me a good negotiation practice, and maybe I could give you some examples as we go through it.
Yeah,
But
for
he
sure.
keeps me sharp. That's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let me tell you a little bit about this, who the listeners are here, and then we'll get into some, perhaps a little mini training session that we can all take away. Is that fair?
Sounds good.
Okay. So it's called the Cabinet Maker Profit System Podcast. You probably can't get much more defined than that, right? So,
Right.
but what people don't understand is how big this industry is. Because when I say cabinet makers, it means people who make what you'd think kitchen cabinet, baths, and closets, all the way up to, so that's the residential side and maybe small commercial. But then there's industrial and institutional, and that gets into the architectural woodworking side. And so we're talking about people who build entire stadiums or universities worth of cabinetry, or a beautiful hotel or a very high-end penthouse. So there's this massive scale of size, and we have listeners from all across that. On the same side, we also have people who do bespoke furniture. I just talked the other day to somebody from Australia that makes custom chairs, just chairs, and runs a very nice,
Wow.
large business doing that. So we've got artists, we've got tradesmen and craftsmen, but regardless, we're all running our businesses and trying very hard to run our businesses so that we can make more money and have more time off. That's why we invited you here to talk to us.
Sounds good. I'm excited.
Yeah. All right. So knowing the scope of who's listening and also knowing your professional background and how you come to this, how can we guide ourselves best as business owners in this world of negotiation? Where do you think we should start looking and using these tools?
Well, the simple answer is everywhere, and I think it'll help to explain what my operational definition is for negotiation. And so I consider a negotiation any conversation where somebody in the conversation wants something. And that definition is intentionally very, very broad, because I think one of the biggest barriers people have to negotiating effectively is a lack of negotiation awareness. You can't perform well in a negotiation if you don't know that a negotiation is taking place.
Ah,
And so, with that definition being so broad, we recognize that negotiation is everywhere. And you'll also recognize that the people with whom we negotiate the most are the people who are closest to us. So, our 2-year-olds, our spouses, but also our business partners, our colleagues at work, our employees, those people. And once you start to recognize negotiations in these everyday type of scenarios, you can work to, first of all, improve your skills for when the big negotiations come up, but also you'll be able to get more value out of your everyday life as well.
so this is a bit of a leading question because I'm formulating this in my mind as I get grayer or lesser
Mm-hmm.
on my head. Is negotiation more about listening or is it more about talking?
It's more about listening. And
Ah,
this is one of the key points about negotiation. And it might surprise people, but when I negotiate, my goal is to keep the breakdown of conversation about 70-30, where I'm listening 70% of the time and I'm only speaking 30% of the time.
hmm.
And I do that because for a number of reasons. The first thing is I know that if I'm doing that, I'm asking great questions. I'm getting more information, and it's creating an information asymmetry in my favor. And
Hmm.
so knowledge is power. That truism holds true in this situation as well. And so you want to try in these conversations to get as much information as possible because it puts you in a better negotiating position.
Ah,
And also, if you're the one asking questions, you're also pulling them in a place where it is more favorable to you. Because a lot of times we go into these conversations because we think that we think we can convince somebody of something, and we try to do that through our words. But we can't convince anybody of anything. What we can do is we can create a persuasive atmosphere that allows them to persuade themselves. And if you keep the breakdown in that way, they feel like they're in control, they feel comfortable, and then they will start to naturally come to your position if you create that atmosphere the right way.
so that's brilliant, by the way. So it makes me feel good
Thank you.
because I was thinking along those lines, but I hadn't gone and asked an expert like yourself about it. So it really is more about listening than it is about doing all the talking.
Absolutely.
Even though good
Absolutely.
fast talking makes good TV, but it doesn't make good negotiating.
Oh, yes. And I say that all the time because the media does a poor job of representing what negotiation is. Because if you have somebody who listens intently, who is respectful, and gives somebody the space to talk, that doesn't make for good TV. They want drama. You know, they they want somebody to be able to speak eloquently for 3 minutes straight without interruption. That's not realistic. And if somebody were to do that to you, how would you feel? You'd be annoyed.
Or
You'd
bored.
be really, really annoyed or bored, right?
Yeah.
And so it is unrealistic and ineffective as well. So,
Yeah.
and I think recognizing this kind of de-stresses, it takes a little bit of pressure off of you because you don't need to sound perfect in order to negotiate well. The people who tend to be the best negotiators, the one who are that are lauded as the best ones in the professional world, are the people who are quiet, who listen, who are respectful, the people you actually want to spend time with. And I think that just makes this skill a little bit more accessible to the common person.
I love it. So what you're saying is what I watch on Suits, which is guys like you, lawyers, is not realistic.
Right? Not at all. Not at all. Not
Well,
that man the bar.
it's a great show. Um, and I'm a big fan of Meghan Markle, but that's a completely different topic. So what I've come to learn, because I'm a student of business as much as I teach the people that I work with. So I'm a professional business coach, but I come at it from a professional sales and marketing perspective. In my coaching world, there's certain questions There are ways that we ask questions to get the best, deepest responses from our clients when we're trying to work towards some goal that they want. What kinds of questions are best for negotiation?
The simple answer is going to be the open-ended questions.
Mm.
So open-ended questions and statements that I call open-ended statements. So these are statements that end in a period, but are clearly requests for information. So open-ended questions: who, what, where, when, why, and how. And then when it comes to open-ended statements, it's something like, help me understand X, Y, Z, or tell me more about blank, something like that. But even though it ends in a period, it's still a request for information. And the reason why we ask questions like this is because it gives you space for elaboration. Because if we ask closed-ended questions like a prosecutor on cross-examination, the person understands that they're being controlled. Didn't you say this? Blah, blah, blah. And so they feel restricted. They're not going to be willing to give you more information. And because of the sentence structure, the question structure, they really can't, because it's a yes or no type of question. And so it feels a little bit uncomfortable at first when you start giving people the bandwidth to elaborate. But what you'll do is that's where what you'll recognize is that's where the gems really are, because we think oftentimes that we know everything we need to know, but that's not the case. And if you have that level of arrogance where you think you understand where the other person's coming from, you're going to ask worse questions, because you're leading them in a place you don't really care what the answer is. And so open-ended questions allows you to actually learn things that you didn't know before.
I'm struggling right now to think of the combination of a good question and a bad question and a situation that I can give you. So maybe you can help me because of your background. We can sort of put it together here. Ultimately, I want to find out so our listeners and our viewers can hear good question versus bad question.
Yeah.
Because it starts, I believe, you have to move from the general to the specific. You can't just jump at it and say, I think we're paying too much for our hardware on our cabinetry to our salesperson or the regional manager that we're doing the big deal with, right?
Right. So you could say, here's a good question. So how did you come to this price point? Something like that. So when you're asking questions, you want to focus on questions that start with what and how, preferably, because if you ask questions that start with why, it can sound accusatory, like a parent and a child type of thing. So you want to try to get away from those. So what and how questions are going to be your best friends. So what made you send this email at this time? What did you mean by that? Help me understand, blah, blah, blah. So those are the types of questions that give the person the opportunity to elaborate, versus, this is a little bit overpriced, isn't it? Our competitors are cheaper, aren't they? Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it's very, very leading. The person feels like you're being aggressive. They feel like they're being controlled. It's not a very organic conversation when you look at it that way.
So what I'm learning from you then is start with that question. Help me understand, or why, how did we come to the pricing structure we have today? Just take me back to the beginning and get that other person talking.
Yeah. Yep. And one of the things I talk about, and this kind of goes to the TED Talk, compassionate curiosity. And I use that term intentionally because think about the way I describe it is in a situation where you're not exactly sure what to say, you can use this as your bedrock. And so let's do this with you.
Sure.
So think about somebody on the world scale, anytime in history, who you think is compassionate. Who comes to mind?
Mother Teresa or Mahatma Gandhi?
Everybody says Mother Teresa. Everybody does. Okay, so Mother Teresa. Okay, now curiosity. That's asking questions. That's the willingness to dig deeply and understand where somebody else is coming from. So the way I say it is, instead of coming up with some kind of robust XYZ type of element for how to use compassion and curiosity, the test I have is, if Mother Teresa was sitting in your seat right now with the same goals that you have right now, what is an open-ended question or open-ended statement that she would ask? And the benefit of thinking about it this way is that it helps to moderate your tone. It helps you to think of a question that is not accusatory. It makes it more genuine. And so that comes off to the other party. They feel less threatened when you're asking a question, because in the business world, if you're asking about the price, they're going to feel challenged. They're going to fight, flight, or freeze response.
Kwame,
They're going to.
would you mind repeating that? Because the
Hello?
connection just broke up and I didn't hear it. It sounded like a wonderful statement.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Okay, what was the last thing you heard?
The whole combination of fight, flight, and then it got quite garbled.
Or freeze.
Okay.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay. And action. And so in the business world, if you're talking about price and the person understands that you're trying to negotiate a better price, they're going to feel that fear response, fight, flight, or freeze, and they're going to start to clam up, run away, or get unduly aggressive. But if you use compassion and curiosity, the benefit is that you moderate your tone in a way that allows you to ask a question and request information in a way that gives them a little bit more confidence in your willingness to understand and listen, and they won't feel as afraid. And
right.
That leads to better, more genuine conversation.
Now, thank you. So I'm envisioning having this conversation, and I'm thinking about when our listeners would be having this conversation. One of the things that I do as a business coach is part of the process of doing our strategic planning, thinking about the bigger picture, is moving people from being reactive in business to proactive. And one of the, sub point 7, 8, or 9 is actually to go to your suppliers and invite them in on my calendar to say, let's talk about our pricing or let's talk about our terms. And to do that, let's say on an annual basis. Have you ever seen situations like that where people are proactively pulling other parties in for that negotiation so that the stage is set and also so that I can prepare myself for that compassionate curiosity, so I can prepare myself for that kind of convo?
Absolutely. And here's the thing. Think about persuading somebody, like trying to lift something heavy. So if you're bench pressing and you have three plates on each side, that's 315 for bench press. That's a lot. It would be a lot easier if I were to simply remove 2 or 3 of those plates. It makes it easier for me to lift this weight. And so thinking about persuasion in terms of the load that you need to carry, the cognitive load that needs to be lifted, it's easier if you take those weights off. And so here's how this metaphor applies. So if you are making multiple touch points to the people with whom you negotiate, you are creating a more persuasive atmosphere. I don't think of there being an actual end and beginning to a negotiation. It's like a never-ending game of chess. You're constantly positioning yourself for the negotiation. And so let's say at the end of the year, the goal is to lower our rates with our suppliers. Right. You might not want to do that in one conversation. It might take 2 or 3 conversations. And you're trying to accomplish different persuasive goals each time. And with each conversation, you are taking the weight off. And so being proactive is going to be key there. And so you might schedule a meeting and strategically decide, I'm not going to ask for this discount right now. I'm going to ask for that in meeting 3. But here's what I will try to accomplish in this specific meeting. And it makes it more likely for you to get what you want in meeting 3.
Interesting and scary at the same time.
Exactly.
Because I want to be in your seat, not the other guy. He doesn't see what's coming.
Mm-hmm. Right. Exactly. And that's the thing. It's if you are. Oh, go ahead.
Well, at the same time, even though I said that, it's disrespectful of me to say that, because I'm not trying to get my hardware components or my edge banding or whatever supplies I'm buying for free. I'm just trying to get it at the best, most economical price and terms. But I don't want to make the other guy hate the deal so badly that now they never want to deliver to me, or they don't want to pick up the phone when I have a question or a problem, right? There is a balance. They have to be profitable. I have to be profitable. We have to work together as partners. So it's a long-term thing. I like your point there that maybe this is a 3-meeting thing, not a quick half hour to bring our prices down by 25%. It's different mentality.
Exactly. And I think one thing that'll help us when it comes to our negotiation strategy is understanding what the goals of negotiation are. And for me, I see there being 3 pillars of negotiation.
Okay.
The first pillar is to get more of what we want. The second pillar is to eliminate or minimize things that we don't want. So that'll be your negotiations to lower prices, to remove inconveniences, those type of things. And then the third pillar of negotiation, which is the most important pillar, but oftentimes it's the pillar that's overlooked, is strengthening relationships. And even in, let's say, a negotiation where, let's say, objectively it fails from an economic perspective. We went in there to get a better rate. We did not get the better rate, but we say, oh, well, this is a failure. But when we expand the scope of what we consider to be successful in a negotiation to include not just pillar number one, not just pillar number two, but pillar number three as well, we can always maximize pillar number three. And when we consider the calculation with pillar number three, we might recognize that pushing them over the edge financially might do critical damage to the third pillar. And it reminds me of the negotiation tactics of Bob Wolf. He was the sports agent for Larry Bird. And he said he would always intentionally leave about 10% of the value that he thought he could claim in a negotiation on the table, because he was focusing so much on the relationship, because he understood that these people are going to be repeat players in his life. And he would be able to garner more benefit, more value from the relationship over the long term, and instead of just having the short-term perspective on finances alone.
Yeah. I have a client right now who didn't know they were doing that step 3, which is strengthen relationships. But as you were talking through the format, it occurred to me that I know he entered into that conversation that I was talking about, like start talking to your vendors. And out of the conversation came this little side point that, hey, we've got a bunch of discontinued items that we no longer carry. And just out of that conversation, he picked up those discontinued items, right? So he's a retailer, an industrial retailer who sells to this larger industry, and some specialty tools and things like that. So he just picked up an entire line that's been discontinued, but the installed base of that line is massive. And there's a lot of guys out there who have that particular tool who need this attachment. And he now has it all at this massive discount, which drives traffic back to his website. And once people are on his website, of course, they're buying abrasives, adhesives, drill bits, all the other things that he sells, right? So actually what you just said, I can see as a pathway to a conversation one of my clients just had.
Absolutely. Oh, that's perfect. That's a brilliant example.
Yeah, it worked out for him really well. And it was a deep discount on this stuff because, once I have it in my warehouse, it costs me rent to keep it as the vendor. So I want to get rid of it. So he picked this stuff up really well priced, let's just say.
No, that's brilliant. And I think that's a great example of how focusing on people's interests is going to be important. And so the interest in what somebody's asking for is the why. So we focus so much on what somebody's asking for in particular, but we don't take the time to ask ourselves, why are they asking for that? What's behind that? And once we start to explore those things, we understand the hidden motivations behind people. And that's where you really get some gems in deals, because when you're negotiating effectively, you're able to trade things that you value highly for things that they don't value highly at all. And so you're trading things of unequal value, but it's beneficial to everybody.
Well, I love these 3 points you gave us. Actually, you've given us a lot. You mentioned compassionate curiosity, by the way. Mm-hmm. And I forgot to mention to people that one of the connections that you and I have is that we both did a TED Talk this year.
Yes. Yep. I loved yours, by the way. It had me laughing early.
Yours got me laughing because of the whole breakfast cereal thing.
Oh yeah. I'm very serious. I'm very particular about my cinnamon toast crunch.
Cinnamon toast crunch. That's good.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Anybody wants to see Kwame's TED Talk, we'll put a link to it in our show notes. And at some point, I guess we'll figure out how people can get in contact with you. But you have to go look up Kwame's talk because it's pretty funny. And that whole breakfast cereal thing got pretty dicey.
Absolutely. It still is. This morning I saw Kai eating my cereal too. I just glared at this boy. Then I'm like, Kwame, he's 2. It's your responsibility to feed him. It's okay.
Yeah. But can't you put the cereal way high up on the shelf? He's 2. He can only get the bottom stuff.
I did. My wife gave it to him. My wife did it. I was gone. I couldn't protect them. No, I know. It's crazy.
Well, listen, this is a good segue. If somebody does want to get in touch with you or find out more about and it sounds like this whole negotiation world has got lots of depth. I mean, you covered
Yeah.
off big meaty things here. But how do we listen to your podcast or get in touch with you? Or
Yeah, so the podcast is called Negotiate Anything, and I also have a free guide for your peeps. It's an 18-page negotiation guide that will walk you through how to kind of prepare systematically for your next negotiation. And it also has a salary negotiation guide and a conflict management guide as well. And what I'm finding is that even more than negotiation, conflict management is an issue that people are dealing with. So trying to provide more resources on the conflict management side and on consulting in that regard too has been something that I'm focusing on because nobody likes having these types of conversations. No. And I feel like it's such a big oversight educationally that we don't teach people how to resolve conflicts effectively, but we focus so heavily on teaching other things like Shakespeare, which is great. It's not that practical.
No. Do you have anything for negotiating within family businesses?
You know what? Fun fact, one of my next episodes coming up is how to negotiate with teenagers. And I have an episode on how to negotiate with your spouse. So nothing in particular with family businesses, but I've worked with family businesses before. I brush off my skills as a mediator because I mediate legal cases. Mm-hmm. And so using that internally, but I think it's the benefit. Obviously, it's frustrating to negotiate within your family business and resolve conflict. But the thing is, everybody, for the most part, within businesses, at least you have that common ground that you want to make money. In some regard, you care about the person. It's easier to find that common ground versus litigation. But sometimes it just takes an outside person to help you find it.
Yeah. The difficulty with family business is also one of the strongest points because I deal with lots of family businesses as well, especially in the trade that I'm in here. Mm-hmm. But I think many family businesses don't recognize this, is that there's a values alignment at a real deep level, at least in a family. Mm-hmm. And exactly. Sometimes it might not seem like there is, when some guy's got a gambling problem, another guy doesn't like to come in early. Those things seem like they're the big day-to-day problems. But at the end of it, the values are still aligned. That's so different than companies where partners are thrown together over a coffee meeting 20 years ago and decide they're going to go into business.
Right. Exactly.
Right? And that's such a powerful thing. Family businesses have this energy, like there's just this bulkiness to them that makes it so that they're really powerful business forces. And it's hard to see when you're in them, but it's easy to see, I guess, for guys like you and I who are on the outside looking in, because you can't break it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, all right. So your podcast is called Negotiate Anything, and you've got an 18-page guide?
Yes, 18-page free guide. I guess let's call it an ebook. That's what people do in the online space.
Yeah.
This is a free ebook.
It is. At 18 pages, it's a free ebook. Well, and I know lots of people like to listen to podcasts because they may not have time to read, but they certainly have time to drive and listen or watch these. So where do we find the 18-page guide? Do you just want me to put it on my show notes, or?
Yeah, I'll give the link a shout out too, and then you can put it in the show notes. But it's
sure.
it's AmericanNegotiationInstitute.com/guide GUIED.
AmericanNegotiationInstitute.com/guide. Okay. And then
exactly. Yep.
If somebody's driving or wants to look this up, you can always come back to our podcast and look in the show notes at cabinetmakerprofitsystem.com. Or we're talking to Kwame Christian, and Kwame's first name is Kwame, and the last name is Christian, just like we all know how to spell it. Right?
Yep.
Yeah, he's nodding his head, but it's a podcast. Right. And your podcast is called...
Sorry.
Tell me more about why you're nodding your head and not talking out loud.
Oh yeah, so I am sick right now, and so I'm trying to save my voice as much as possible because I have to go back up and parent this kid, and I know I need my voice for that.
I was
come back,
Daddy. You know, I was practicing my open-ended questions on you there. Didn't you catch that?
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
All right. Hey, Kwame, thank you so much for joining us here. I appreciate it. I know it's a holiday in the States right now, and you and I are such great schedulers that we booked this meeting on a holiday. Go up and take care of Kai, give him a big hug and a kiss, and try to get your cereal back.
Yes, my pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you again. This was fun.
Yeah, all right. Have a great day. Thanks, everybody.